What's going on guys, Aero here and welcome back to another video. Now in today's video, I want to talk to you guys more about Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but I want to talk to you guys about an aspect that I've actually wanted to make a video on for a while now, and that is its combat. Now I think that pretty much everyone can agree that when it comes to Xenoblade games, combat is like one of the most important parts, as it's basically what you're going to be doing for like 90% of the game as you're playing through the game and getting through the story and doing all the tough battles. So it's kind of really important to make sure that the combat system is something engaging and fun that a lot of people really enjoy. Now unfortunately, when Xenoblade 3 was revealed in the trailer that we got back in February, they didn't show us any type of gameplay of the combat system or battling or anything like that, so we don't really know exactly what the combat for this game is going to be like just yet, and so a lot of this video is just going to be kind of speculation and my hopes and wishes for stuff that I would like to see in the gameplay for this game. And so in this video, I'm going to be giving my thoughts on the combat systems from Xenoblade Chronicles 1, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna the Golden Country. And I'm going to be talking about just the aspects that I like from each combat system, the things that I don't like, and how I feel like that they could be improved, and what they could possibly do in the end for Xenoblade 3. Now keep in mind, these are just my opinions on the different elements of each combat system. Something that I don't like about the combat might be your favorite aspect of it, and maybe something that I really like could be something you don't like at all, so either way, definitely be sure to comment down below and let me know which parts of each combat system you really enjoy and what would you want for Xenoblade 3's combat to be like as well. Alright, but starting off here, we have the combat for Xenoblade 1, and there's actually a lot of things that I really like about this combat, probably more than most people. One of the things that I like about Xenoblade 1's combat are the positional attacks. So if you're playing a Shulk for example and you use backslash, you can actually do more damage if you hit the enemy from its back, and then if you're using like Slit Edge for example, if you hit the enemy from its side you can lower its defense. So I think that having little bonuses like that for hitting enemies at the right spot or doing attacks at the right time is something that I really enjoy. The visions mechanic is also one of my favorite parts about this combat. I think that it's so cool because Xenoblade 1's story of course revolves around the Monado, which is like this really awesome sword that allows Shulk to be able to see into the future, and seeing that in cutscenes is also really awesome, but the fact that it's actually baked into the gameplay itself is just really cool to me. I think that it makes Xenoblade 1's combat just extremely unique because you can actually get like visions of the future and see like your party members getting damaged. You can see the future and know what's going to happen in the next 10 seconds, and then being able to have the ability to change that future to create a more safer reality, like within the combat itself, I think is just really fun, and I really do enjoy that. Now auto-attacking is an important part of Xenoblade 1 and Xenoblade 2's combat, but I much prefer it in Xenoblade 1 because you can actually move around while you're auto-attacking. So like if you're playing a Shulk, you can move around the enemy to try to get to its back while you're still auto-attacking and then go right for a backslash after. So I really like having that mobility in Xenoblade 1's combat. It's not really in Xenoblade 2's, which I'll talk about when I get to that, but I really do like that aspect about the auto-attacks inside of this game. And then the last thing that I love about Xenoblade 1's combat is how fast you can do chain attacks multiple times in battle. So like Xenoblade 1's combat system is really based around doing a lot of chain attacks and being able to do multiple of them, whereas like Xenoblade 2's combat system is really based around getting a whole bunch of orbs first and then doing one finale kind of chain attack at the end to do a ton of damage. I like how in this game you can actually do chain attacks a ton of times, and like in the middle of a chain attack you can actually fill up the entire party meter again, like you can see Ryan doing right here, and then basically because of that you can do a chain attack immediately after the chain attack ends, so I really love that aspect about Xenoblade 1's combat. Now moving on to things that I don't like about Xenoblade 1's combat, my least favorite part about the entire combat definitely has to be that when you're doing chain attacks, the ability to get another round within a chain attack depends on the affinity between the characters, and it's kind of luck based and chance based because sometimes you'll just be really lucky and get another round in a chain attack, or sometimes you can just have really bad luck and you won't get to go again. So having to rely on luck and RNG for the best possible chain attack performance is definitely my least favorite part about Xenoblade 1's combat. I think that Xenoblade 2 does this much better, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. Now another thing that I dislike about Xenoblade 1's combat is the tension mechanic. So when you're fighting against an enemy, all of your playable party members are going to have like these different facial icons that will happen in the corner, and this depends on basically like their motivation while they're fighting. So like if they get a whole bunch of debuffs that are added onto them, they'll have like a sad face icon, and because of that you'll have to walk over to them, press a button to encourage them, and that will make them perform better in the game. I don't think that it really kind of does anything or adds a lot to the gameplay itself. It's kind of just tedious seeing that like somebody gets toppled over or something and you have to walk over to them and encourage them to be able to do better again. I think that the idea was cool on paper, but they just didn't execute it properly, so maybe they can figure out a better way to incorporate this if they do decide to do something similar in Xenoblade 3. And then finally, the last thing that I dislike about Xenoblade 1's combat isn't really even about the combat itself, but I don't like how the vision music interrupts you whenever you get a vision in the combat itself. I think that it can be really annoying, and the thing is the track isn't even a bad track, it's actually a really nice banger, but it just gets kind of annoying when every time you're listening to like a really cool boss theme or something, and then all of a sudden the vision music starts playing because you got a vision, and now it kind of interrupts the entire kind of cool battle theme that you were experiencing before. So I really hope that even if Xenoblade 3 has a really awesome, kind of really cool gimmick type of music track like that, I just hope that the gimmick music doesn't play every single time something happens in the combat, because it would get really annoying. Alright, but now we're going to be moving on to Xenoblade 2, so in terms of the stuff that I really like about Xenoblade 2's combat, one of the things that I really like is the element of blade switching, so you can actually switch out blades in Xenoblade 2's combat, and because of that you can get access to completely different arts and abilities and things like that depending on which blade that you're using. It adds a lot of kind of uniqueness to each character and what blades you have equipped on them, so I'm actually a really big fan of that. I also really love how Xenoblade 2 expands upon the break and topple from Xenoblade 1, so like Xenoblade 1 you've got break and topple and daze, but Xenoblade 2 actually changes this to where after break and topple, it turns into launch where the enemy like flies up into the air and starts spinning around, and then you can smash them down and actually have items fall out of them and stuff. It's actually really fun and really satisfying to do, so I actually really love that, and I hope that they still bring back that element of break and topple, but have something really fun like that also in Xenoblade 3. Now going back to when I mentioned earlier how my least favorite part about Xenoblade 1's combat is if you want the ability to get another round in a chain attack is dependent on luck and RNG, I actually really love how it's done in Xenoblade 2. So Xenoblade 2 has blade combos, and if you do an entire blade combo, you'll start to see this orb spinning around the enemy, and depending on how many orbs that you get, when you go into a chain attack, you try to break one of the orbs, and if you break an orb, you're guaranteed to go again in the chain attack. So depending on that, you can actually plan out how many orbs you have spinning around the enemy, and exactly what moves to use to break them, and try to maximize how many turns that you get. So I really love how the chain attack rounds in Xenoblade 2 are based around the gameplay instead of luck like in Xenoblade 1. And then the last thing that I like about Xenoblade 2's combat is when you're fighting against an enemy, after you get it to a certain amount of HP, it will actually enter like an enraged state where it will start to do more damage and have better defenses, and I like how it adds like a small little extra layer of stress in the gameplay because you actually have to start to do a little bit better, and the enemy will start to do more damage and stuff, so you're actually going to have to play a little bit better, so I like how it adds that to the gameplay. But now moving on to the things that I don't like about Xenoblade 2's combat, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I don't like is how auto attacks work in this game, because basically the way that auto attacks work, you basically just kind of have to be standing there for all of your auto attacks to happen. You can't move an auto attack like you could in Xenoblade 1, and I know that there's some tricks that you can do like being able to cancel the animations so you can charge up your arts even faster, but I'm just not a fan of having to kind of stand there while the auto attacks happen. I don't know about you guys, but personally, I like to have some mobility inside of the combat when I'm playing, and kind of like to move around the enemy and stuff, so I'm not really a huge fan of just kind of standing there in Xenoblade 2, so I don't really like that. And even in terms of like the actual mobility itself, it's also very slow and sluggish. Like you really get to move kind of very slowly when you're kind of moving around the enemy. The only time that you actually get to move a little fast is when you're using a special where you get to like throw the sword away to Mithra, for example, and then you get like 4 seconds to kind of move around really fast before the sword lands back in your hands again. I'm not really a big fan of that, so I really hope that Xenoblade 3's kind of gameplay does have some more mobility, because I don't really like to just be kind of standing in one spot during the combat. Another thing is also with the way that the combat is crafted, it's really kind of based around doing one big finale type of chain attack once you get a bunch of orbs, and because of that the beginning of all the battles is also kind of just really slow. You're really just trying to get a bunch of different orbs on there, trying to do different blade combos, and just auto attacking a lot and trying to build up your arts, and so because of that the HP really just kind of goes very slowly on a lot of these enemies during kind of the beginning parts of the combat, but once you get a couple of orbs and then finally go into that chain attack, that's when it gets really fun because you get to break a bunch of orbs, do a ton of damage, and put the enemy into overkill. So personally, I'm not a big fan of how the combat is kind of slow at the beginning. I really do hope that Xenoblade 3's combat is just fast paced and really fun throughout the entire battle. And then the last thing here about Xenoblade 2's combat is just the complexity of the combat system itself. Now Xenoblade 2's combat system is actually really complex in terms of all the different elements and parts that are in it. You've got the chain attacks, and you've got the auto attacks, and the arts, and you've got the blade switching, and you've got elements, and then you've got blade combos, and then you've got driver combos, and you've got fusion combos, and chain attacks, and affinity. Like there's so much different stuff that's already based around in this combat system, and because of that the combat system does look very intimidating to a lot of people. where someone can just look at an image like this and be turned off from the game because of how complex it looks with all the stuff going on. And maybe this is like your favorite part about Xenoblade 2's combat, maybe you love how complex it is with all the different things that are going on, but I actually believe that you don't really need to have a super complex battle system for it to be fun and good, and especially to bring in a lot more people into the combat system itself and having more people being engaged in the gameplay. I think that having a more simplified combat system is not a bad thing, and if anything, it really helps the game out a lot, so I don't really mind which one they do. I'm sure that they already have an idea for what they think would be the best, but personally, I don't mind having simplified combat systems. I don't think that it needs to be something as super complex as this, and especially because of how Xenoblade 2's tutorials just explain this in the worst possible way, it just turns off a lot of people from it, so it's just really unfortunate to see. Now the final combat system that we have here is actually my favorite one out of all of the Xenoblade games, and that is from Torna the Golden Country. So Torna is a DLC expansion that came out for Xenoblade Chronicles 2, it's a prequel story that takes place 500 years before the events of Xenoblade 2, and it actually has a brand new combat system that's different from the main game in Xenoblade 2, and it's actually really fun because it's really similar to Xenoblade 2's combat system, but it also has many different elements and things that are incorporated, so I really feel like it's just Xenoblade 2's combat system, but close to perfection. So in Torna, the things I really love about this combat system is the ability to Vanguard switch, which is like this really cool ability that allows you to switch between the driver and blade in the combat, and because of that, depending on when you decide to do it, it actually has like this really cool special effect that happens as well. So like for example, if you're playing as Laura and you decide to get a break element on somebody, once you get the break effect, you can switch out to your blade Jin, and when you do that, Jin will instantly topple the enemy upon impact, and I think that that's really fun and really cool to do, and because of that, you can like switch out different blades with different characters to being able to launch enemies and smash enemies and topple them. It's just really fun, and I love how that's incorporated. You also have like these different blades that you can switch in the middle, and when you switch out blades like in the party behind you, you can also have different elements and kind of effects that happen as well. Also, with the way that blade combos work, they're not like a special route that's already pre-assigned, but rather you can just get any orb that you want by doing any type of special, and I really love that because then when you get into a chain attack, you can pretty much have a ton of orbs whenever you want, so that's really fun as well. I think that the combat is just much more fluid and really enjoyable. But just like Xenoblade 2, the thing that I don't like about the combat in Torna is once again with the mobility, characters are still really sluggish and move really slowly around the enemy, so I really just wish that it was faster. And so those are the different types of Xenoblade combat systems that we've had in the past, but now it comes to kind of speculating and thinking about what they can do with the combat system in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Now in the end, it's down to monolithsoft for whatever vision they have for how the combat and the gameplay of this game could be like. They could decide to keep it like Xenoblade games mostly, with having like the same foundation of auto attacks and using arts and things like that, or they could decide to take it in a completely new direction and have it be completely different, and I've seen a lot of people talking about kind of how they would want the combat to be like, so I feel like we could talk about that for a bit as well, and what direction they could go. Now one of the things that makes Xenoblade so special is its combat system because of how it's so different from your main traditional RPGs, and because of that though, it also kind of hurts it because there's a lot of people who just don't like that type of style with how the gameplay and combat works. I've talked to a lot of people who said like, yo Aero, I love Xenoblade so much, I love everything about it, I love the story, I love the music, I love the world, the characters, everything is just so good, but I just can't get into the combat. I'm not a big fan of the combat, I don't like how the gameplay is, I don't like how you fight the enemies, that's just like my least favorite part about this game, and it kind of really hurts for me to being able to get into it. And for me, it's always surprising when I hear that because of course I love Xenoblade's combat, I can have hundreds of hours of fun with Xenoblade's combat, but I know a lot of people who just can't get into it unfortunately, and the thing that I actually really respect about monolithsoft though is that they're just going to make the combat system that they feel like would be the best. They're not really going to try to go for what they feel like would be appealing to a majority of people, they just know like their fans who really like their games are going to go out and buy it, but I think that definitely if they did have a kind of different type of gameplay, then maybe to some people it would definitely help a lot more people trying to get into Xenoblade, being able to get into it who didn't like the combat before. Now I always see a lot of people saying that they should just make Xenoblade 3's combat fully action, like in Breath of the Wild or Tales of Arise or Final Fantasy VII Remake, where you can just run around the enemy and do different attacks to dodge around them, and being able to do different types of button combos and things to do different slashes and things, and I feel like that type of combat just really wouldn't work with the way that Xenoblade is made, but I think that they can definitely incorporate aspects of it, and I think that doing that could really help the game out a lot and make it really fun and engaging, but I don't think that it needs to go full on action, and I think that that's kind of really what makes Xenoblade so special is because it isn't just fully action and it's like its own special thing. And if you guys don't know, Final Fantasy VII Remake is actually my favorite video game combat system of all time. I can play that combat for hours and just have so much fun. I really love that, but I feel like it works really well for that game, and something like that just wouldn't work so well with Xenoblade. However, there are elements and things that I feel like that they can use from those types of action RPGs and use that to make Xenoblade's combat even better. Like, one of the things that I really love about Final Fantasy VII Remake's combat is how you have the ability to switch between any character in the middle of combat instantly by just pressing a button. I love how you can be slashing through a whole bunch of enemies as Cloud with the Buster Sword, then press one button, and then immediately you're switching to Tifa where you're punching a whole bunch of enemies, press a button again and you're shooting a whole bunch of magic with Aerith. I love that aspect of the combat so much, and I feel like having something like that inside of Xenoblade would just be amazing, especially if you're like playing as one character and you inflict break and then you can switch to another character right away and then do toppling. That would also help you not having to rely on the AI, because sometimes the AI just doesn't do what you want it to do, so I feel like being able to switch between all the characters mid-combat would just be so much fun. But yeah, there you go guys, those are my thoughts on the combat systems of Xenoblade games and potentially what I would like to see inside of the combat system of Xenoblade 3. If you guys enjoyed this video, then definitely be sure to click that like button and also comment down below and let me know what you guys think about this. What is your favorite Xenoblade combat system? What do you guys like about it? What do you not like about it? What would you like for Xenoblade 3's combat to be like? Definitely be sure to comment down below and let me know. If you're new to this channel, then please be sure to subscribe. I'm definitely going to have some more Xenoblade content in the future, so definitely be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on that. Click on that bell to become a part of the notification squad. Go follow me on Twitter at Aero so you can be featured in videos, and also join my Discord server as well. We've got a bunch of people in there who are always talking about Pokemon and Smash Bros and Nintendo, so definitely be sure to join that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching.